Well, greetings, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Lightbulb Moments. We're glad you're with us today. Whether you are joining us live, which is on about every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, or listening to the podcast or watching us on YouTube, we're glad you're with us. I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Lightheart Sanders, who has been a sponsor of this forum for many years. And they've also been a great partner in several projects, including some of our data projects. So shout out to Lightheart Sanders. And today we have a special episode and a special guest who I will get to shortly. But before we get to our guest, I've got some exciting announcements today. The first announcement has to do with the theme for the 5th annual Phil Conference, which is coming up May 18th through 20th in Austin, Texas. And every year we give great thought into what the theme is for the conference. Now, the conference in and of itself does have a theme in the sense the name Phil means to do a couple things: fill the gaps in your business, and then also fill your bucket by getting away from the day-to-day business. But we also love having a theme that allows us to explore something that's meaningful to all of us. And this year, we landed on a theme that we're super excited about. It's a theme that really is part of the DNA of Qnity and really why Qnity was created from the very beginning. And that theme for this year is and. All right, well, and so what does that mean? Well, what it means, first of all, is it's not either, nor is it or, but it's living in a world where we're looking at how things work together. People and profit, tech and touch, head and heart. And again, fill the gaps and your bucket. So that theme will be explored in many different ways throughout the conference. It'll be explored in the actual content, the breakouts, and a lot of the conversation will be about living in this world where two things can coexist together. And in many ways, life really is about the combination of two different things. And so love the theme. And you're going to hear more about it in the upcoming weeks. But there we go. That's the theme for this year's Phil. So stay tuned to see how this will manifest. If you're not signed up yet, you should sign up. We are actually, I think, way ahead of last year in terms of registrations. My understanding is registrations this year already is where we're at deep into April last year. So it is possible that we will sell out this year. So you want to get your tickets and join us at our signature annual conference, the Phil. All right. The second thing I want to get to is something that we are going to be undertaking in the second quarter, and that will be a 17% growth challenge. A national growth challenge. Now, the last time we did this was several years ago, and we had, I believe it was about 50 companies where they had members of their team participate in a 13-week period where we challenged the individuals to grow their sales, in particular client count and or average ticket, by 17% over what we'll call their previous normal. And this will be sponsored by Forrest. And we're very excited about this because what this will do is hopefully bring an additional revenue into the ecosystem, the salon ecosystem, that's sorely needed. We're coming off a year where sales were flat. Service sales were up slightly last year from the previous years, and retail sales continued a multi-year decline. So anything that we can do to help increase sales is something that helps everybody. Now, a little bit more about this. The last time we did this, we had over 564 people and participate of 50 salons. And it was a 90-day period, 13 weeks, 90 days, whichever way you want to look at it. And we found that last time we did this, 51%, over half the people had at least 17% sales growth, which is phenomenal. However, 388 people had double-digit growth, and 346 people had double-digit retail growth. So now a little bit more about the last challenge we did to give you an idea of the kind of numbers we're looking at. We found that the average service provider prior to the challenge, or their previous normal, was 21 clients a week, and the average person increased it to 24 clients a week. An average ticket went from $77.32 to $81.53. So what that meant is the average participant had another $17,316 of sales if it spread out over the year. And what that meant for the group was an additional almost $10 million of sales generated from this activity. $9,765 what it amounted to when we combined all the participants and annualized it. So anyway, we'd love to have you be involved. Watch for more information on how to be involved. It does require a sign up. There's a couple moving parts that goes into this. We need to have everybody submit their information so we find out what everybody's new normal is. But so those are my two announcements for today. Super excited about both of these initiatives, the Fill theme, as well as the 17% challenge. So, all right, let's now get to our special guest, who is a familiar name and a familiar face and a very familiar and important member of our community, the one and only Jodi Ohama. Jodi, why don't we have you grab the mic? And there you are. How are you?
I'm great, Tom. How are you? Nice to
I'm
see
good.
you.
It's been forever. We've wanted to
It
get you as a
has.
guest for a long time. You stay busy. Let me give a little bit about your background, though, okay?
Sounds great.
A little bit, a little context for what we're going to talk about today. So what's really happening inside leadership teams right now, and why are so many managers feeling stuck? So in this episode, Jodi, who is a Qnity guide, a circle facilitator, and a veteran leadership coach, for a candid conversation on what leaders are facing today. Drawing from Qnity circle groups and a global workplace study, we'll explore declining manager engagement, leadership accountability, succession planning, hiring decisions, and operational clarity. So if you're leading people, which most of us are that partake in this forum, building future leaders or navigating growth, this episode will provide insight grounded on data, dialogue, and decades of experience. There we go.
Yeah. Fun. Well, yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation for sure, Tom. And thanks for having me, especially on a topic that I'm so passionate about, leadership and how we create and develop leaders to be good, good humans in the world. So excited to be here. So thanks.
Well, you're on the front line leading our circle groups, and you get to interact with dozens of people, and it gives you a great pulse in terms of what's on people's minds. So before we go any further, why don't you provide for our listeners just a little bit of context to what a circle group is and the general format of it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love the circle group. So circle groups are curated groups between 8 to 13 participants. There's leaders, there's owners, there are different groups where we get together to discuss, or we share best practices, or we discuss challenges through a series of facilitated activities. So as a facilitator, I get to hold the container and really just create the space for people to be heard and for people to share, and just, yeah, it's incredible. The group, the groups sort of, I'll just walk you through sort of what generally happens in a 90-minute call. There's a shared best practice, what we call a conversation starter. So it's someone comes and brings something forward to the rest of the group where something that's working really well for them in their business. And then the rest of the participants have an opportunity to ask questions, which is magic. It's so different than, just networking events. Where you get to hear something or you get to hear, what people are doing. Like the magic is being able to ask a question of like, what caused you to do that? Or what would you do differently? Or, how did you set this up? Or, like it's just, there's a lot of learning in that. So that's one of the activities. Then another of the activities is called in the barrel, where that just it's the day of, and if someone has a challenge or maybe an opportunity that they want to get some different perspectives on, they get to go on the hot seat, they share it. I help them sort of create a more succinct statement of the problem that they're trying to solve, and the rest of the group gives guidance, but in the form of a question. So something like, have you tried or have you considered? And the person who's brought forth the challenge or opportunity, they don't get to talk. So it's like there's something so magical that happens in that, of just there's a different way of listening. So there's a lot of great ideas and insights that get put forward, but also what tends to happen is a person who's brought forth the item, something may shift in their thinking about it, and they can walk away from that with just a new perspective on how they might sort of approach it. So yeah, it's a very special group and very special activities. It's fun. I love being the facilitator of it. It's challenging, but also I love it so much. Ensuring that everyone's heard and that they get to contribute, and yeah, it's like magic. And a bunch of different topics. Of course, leadership comes up a lot. And it's interesting, from the executive or like the owners groups, I hear a lot of leadership topics like, well, how do I develop leaders, or how do I hold them accountable, or how do I, there's this. And then from the manager group, this sort of this in-between group between, executives and employees, I hear a lot of, how do I get all this done? And how do I have balance, and yeah, how do I hold people accountable? So like there's this beautiful I love having, different groups, because there's this beautiful connection and themes that I see, and yeah, I love them.
So right now it's probably about what, 40 people maybe altogether, somewhere in that.
Yeah, I think yeah, about that 40 people.
Yeah. And, so as you mentioned, there's different groups based upon role, whether it's an owner or manager, whatever. And, I would argue that this really gives us a real-time pulse of what's going on in the hearts and minds of a leader, because they're showing up, with their most pressing issues. And it does give us a barometer. So let's go through some of the things that you're hearing as recurring themes that's coming up during some of these circles.
Yeah, just things like, of course we hear these like how to drive sales. Retail is a big one that's shown up a lot in this past year, just approaching retail differently, just as you said at the beginning of the call, it's been declining. Getting staff buy-in, again, like developing leaders, how to be more efficient or effective in training, whether that's service training, leadership training, front desk training, how to motivate or reward long-term employees or top service providers. Compensation comes up. Growth paths, that's a big one. How do I create what are the best practices on creating growth paths for maybe some of those support staff? It's like, yeah, there's inventory, best practices on inventory. It just that it's yeah, every call is different, but um yeah, those are some of the topics that I just think of in the last while that have come up.
Yeah, and it's a safe environment. I mean, mastermind is another common term that's you. I mean, we like to think that ours has a certain specialness to it beyond a normal mastermind group, but that's really what it is. It's people showing up in a safe environment. And when you mention a container, what do you mean by a container?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm glad you said that, the safe environment. We have very clear code of conduct and we ask for rules of engagement before anyone even joins Circle. They have to agree to these, the code of conduct. And and I hold that very clearly, this code of conduct. So, some of the items on there are, the willingness to participate, trust and openness, not judging people where they're at in their journey, really appreciating and acknowledging the generosity of people who share. Um, yeah, confidentiality, it's what we talk about in that group is confidential. You can't share that outside of that group without the permission of the person who shared it. Yeah, so and I often say like I'm very grateful when people show up and they share like what's going on, and I'm like I'm so grateful that they still make time to come to this 90 minute and to show up however they are, like to show up wherever they're at, and that's a gift. And I think that I think that's part of what makes Circle good too, great too, is that they have the supportive community to just be who know it, who've been there or who can imagine being there. So there's something that's a real gift in being seen like that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's an art to facilitation, and I think that you have that art probably better than anybody we work with. And some of the things that you bring into the facilitator role, share with us what that looks like.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that. It's I've done a lot of training on facilitation. I think there's yeah, I think yeah, the things that I do that I think contribute to this container or how to hold it is the act of listening, the encouraging the participation, calling on people, um, acknowledging people. Sometimes it's cutting off people, which like that I don't love, but like sometimes it's like, just again in service of the entire community. There's this sort of fine dance that a facilitator does to again in service of the group of like how do we hear all these different voices. I love that our fill theme is and because it's this like and it's like how do we see multiple sides or perspectives of something, not just it's things are very rarely black and white. So yeah, I think that's role as facilitator is like how do we hear everyone's voice? How does every voice get at the table? And how do we create this space? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, some of the topics that you mentioned, obviously a lot of them are labor related because this is a labor related or a labor intensive industry.
Yeah.
Getting staff buy-in, compensation, motivating, rewarding, managing staff morale during transition,
Yeah.
flexible schedule. So a lot of these are really staffing related, but you also have selling retail in there. Good
Yeah.
segue into the 17% challenge, which hopefully could be something that is a solution to that. So any other
Yeah.
topics that really just jumped out to you that you really want to highlight?
Yeah, but I have to I have to highlight the leadership piece because all of this, all of these challenges can be often addressed by how one leads, so I want to dive into, this developing leaders and how we develop leaders and how we hold people accountable and capable. That it comes up a lot, and whether that is because I'm so passionate about leadership, maybe as a facilitator, I bring that flavor to the circle, but it also, people, um, yeah, it does come up a lot. Like, how do I get my leaders to do this? Or like, how do I develop leaders or how to as leaders as managers is like how do I get my people to do this? It's this constant question, and it's interesting now. I've been doing the circle groups, facilitating the circle groups for a couple years, and um it is a note from Michelle. I say more about holding people capable. I will hold on 1 sec on that. This place of um managers and leaders. this place that we're in right now, we're in a really strange time. And we're in, we're talking about it for a while. We're in this age of disruption, but we're in, VUCA times, or volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. And like, how do we as leaders really hold people capable? And there is this difference of capable and accountable. Accountable, when you hear that word accountable, like there's this piece of um, like you're accountable to someone. It's like it's more, it's like task accountability. But when you're talking about capability, it's like it's looking at a human as that they're capable. They're capable of doing these things. So I like that switch, even in that, I like that switch, and I encourage leaders to think about that, of like, rather than holding people accountable, how do I hold them capable? And it changes how you might develop leaders, or how you might set things up for people to be successful. Uh, yeah, so that's what I mean by, capable and accountable. I think I went off a little bit. What was this leadership piece? I shared with you a study, Tom. The
Yeah, let's
recent
get to
study.
that
This.
next.
Oh
Before we
yeah,
get to the study,
yeah.
there's
Sorry.
a question that came up. And John, good morning. Thank you, John, for your question. Do you see a difference in leadership styles between stylist-led owners and non-industry-led owners? It's an interesting
Oh, great
question. Thanks,
question.
John.
Yeah. Do I see a difference between stylist-led owners and industry?
You got to think
Um,
about that one, don't you? It's a
yeah, I
thought-provoking
do.
question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think of course, I would have to say yes, because there is a difference in the actual experience and lived experience of each of those leaders. And yet, I think that there's not, I've seen very capable leaders who are stylist leaders, and very capable leaders who are non-stylist leaders. And I've seen the opposite of that. So I think that it's, if I look at it, I think it's like just a different skill set. But, it's a different, like, leadership itself is a different skill set. But yeah, I'm sure that there is a difference for sure, just because of lived experience, just how, how one could speak from experience when they're leading someone else. So I don't think it's a very clear answer, John, but
It's a
yes,
good,
and
yeah, it's a good question because a stylist led leader, if I'm understanding, I mean, they've got that street credit of actually performing the craft.
right. Yeah.
But like anything else, there's pros and cons to any experience path.
Right.
Someone that's non-industry may not have bias and may be able to have a fresh look at it, and may
Right.
actually come from a very different experience. So it's a cool question, and I'm glad. All right, you started to mention a study. Let's go there for a moment, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a study on the state of the global workplace. So a little bit about the study, and then maybe some of the findings that you find interesting.
Yeah, it's a study. It's a Gallup puts on these studies, and this one is 2024. So they were looking, or sorry, 2025, and they're looking at 2024 data, and I think it's like over 200, it's close to 250,000 people that they studied and had or participated in the research. And they're looking at productivity, employee engagement, employee wellness, how people feel about their work and lives. And what's interesting about this study and is that in 2024, employee engagement fell 2 points. And it's only the second time it's happened in the last 12 years. The last time it happened was during COVID. And so, there's interest to that. It's like, oh, okay, well, what's happening? And to go deeper in the study, they found that the group of people that had the biggest drop in engagement, or the biggest decline in engagement, were managers. This
Hmm.
middle sort of group of people, so not executives, not employees, these managers. And some of the reasons stated were, role overload, or lack of prioritization, or ambiguity. Like there's, yeah. So, and then the study further went into like, okay, it's so correlated and clear that when your managers are disengaged, your workforce is disengaged. So you have um, lower productivity, you have lower, team retention, you have lower engagement. Like there's a direct correlation. If the top group is less engaged, it doesn't affect the employees as much. But yeah, so The other part I think that was interesting to me was in that manager group, it was primarily managers under 35 and women. There was a real decline in women's engagement. So yeah, I look at that and say, wow, okay, if this is happening, and this is a global workforce study, it's all over the world. We see it's a little bit different in North America, but still, there's an opportunity there for us. Like, what do we do differently now as leaders in today's world that can set our people up for success? We have to shift a little bit differently. I have lots
So
of thoughts.
under 35 and female in
Mhm.
particular, huh? Sound familiar in terms of an industry?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and when I think about it, it's interesting because this is a study, but it also I see that reflected in the work that I do, like whether it's in the circle groups or in the Qnity one-on-one, but also, I coach, I leadership coach in other industries, like manufacturing and real estate and construction, and it's the same. We see this I hear like role overload, just like I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or there's like I don't have the skills to do this. And, so it's common throughout. I do see it. So it was yeah, interesting to see it in this study. And then it's also, what if this is the first time it's declined in 12 years, like what does that look like in the future? So
So
mhm,
would there be some keys to success to really address that
yeah,
are top of mind
yes.
for you?
Yeah, 100%. In the study, what they say that, there are three things that they say to do is one is to have very clear, ensure that all the managers receive training. I wrote down the stat. So ensure managers receive management training. So it's not just like task training, but like how do you manage? How do you manage people and engage people? And in the study, they said that less than half of the world's managers say they've received management training. So number one, we need to train our managers.
Yeah.
Number two, which of course is so dear to my heart that they state in the report is coaching, is that they say teach managers effective coaching techniques, which I think is really telling with what our employees need from us. It's gone are the days where you tell someone to do something and they do it. It's like it's coaching and like how do we how do managers coach and ask versus tell, create, foster and nurture that sense of autonomy and even sovereignty, right? Like this, um, yeah. So that there's a second thing that they said. And then the third one is not only not only provide training, but also to celebrate, like to ensure that that it's consistent, that development is constant, that they receive feedback. So that's what the study says. I think, of course, role clarity. Um, that is such a big one, like role clarity um, and not like role clarity, not just like here's what you're responsible for, but actually providing a very clear picture of what success looks like for this role and giving key measures, some KPIs. We're great at Qnity to help people do this. Role clarity, using 5 functions is brilliant. Giving, ensuring that we have key measures or KPIs. So I think that is big. And of course, like the skill development, skills like emotional intelligence, how to provide feedback, how to coach, how to make decisions, all these, yeah, communication, how to avoid triangulation, like all of those pieces, like also very, very important.
What's triangulation? I know the answer, but maybe everybody doesn't know what it
Yeah,
means.
it happens. Triangulation is when you don't go to the person that, can make a difference, or you're not going directly to the person that there's a challenge with. And so you bring other people in, and then there's like this little um there's a triangle. Yeah, it's not, it's an indirect way of trying to solve a problem. And it actually by uh it creates more problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I have an issue with Jodi, instead of
Hmm.
talking to Jodi about it, I talk to Susan about it.
Yeah.
and which puts Susan in a bad spot because Susan's wondering, why are you talking to me about this? Why aren't you talking to Jodi? I mean, that's triangulation, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it creates, it really is it erodes culture. It just erodes trust. Yeah, it's not, there's nothing good about it. The only way to, the only time you'd want to go to someone else is if you're going to a leader to ask, hey, how may I have this conversation? How might I have this conversation? Can you help me role play this conversation? Get some perspectives. But that's the only time that I would say it's, yeah, uh, yeah, right. So.
Is there anything else from the study that you want to bring up, or?
No, just, I think, I shared, I'm just looking at my notes, I shared that it's so important that our managers are engaged because it does really reflect on our teams. But also just, I think it's important to note that, the times that we're in, this disruption, this new era of work where we have AI that really has a potential to transform all industries. And it's happening, and it says this in the study too, it's happening at the same time where managers are, less engaged. And it's like, it could be like the perfect time to bring those tools together. That, there's what else is happening in the workforce, of course, lots of retirements, big, our mentors are leaving. Um, the, more turnover, there's shrinking budgets, of course, as we have this, and then employee wants more flexibility. So like we're that is important, I think, to note of like this is the new era of our workforce. um and to to do things that we've always done, to do things that we've done in the past is not going to get us. We're not living in the same times as we were. So we do need to adapt. We need to adjust. So I think that's it about the
Yeah,
study. But yeah, I can geek out. I could geek out about it.
it's a good question here. What do you do if your
Yeah.
managers are currently disengaged?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'd love to hear from the group too, what they're doing. I think that it's small steps. Qnity, we talk about small steps. It is really about, as leaders, ensuring that we're looking for the good and that we're celebrating those wins for sure to build this trust and the confidence momentum. 100% we need to provide role clarity. What does success look like? What is like who is responsible for what? How do I hold that person capable and give them the skills that they need? It's mentorship for sure. And if it's not mentorship from the leader, then mentorship from someone, source it, outsource it if you need to, but there needs to be some mentorship and development. But yeah, I think it's like that connecting. I think it is about finding things to celebrate, and having clarity, yeah, objective, not just subjective, but like objective clarity of like, oh, here's what success looks like, and here's some, key measures to that. Yeah, recognizing people, making sure you don't take them for granted. Also, those warning signs of that burnout, emotional burnout, I think using the tools, for any of the listeners who are currently using our execution tools, Qnity's execution tools, that 13-week plan, or sort of helping people organize their days and their weeks, I think is really important. Um, because, we have that fallacy. We think that things are going to take a shorter time than they actually do. And or we don't actually consider the bigger picture of everything that we need to get done. And managers tend to try to overpack their schedules with the work when we like often say we have to only schedule about 60% of our time. We need about 40% time just to be adaptive and reactive to like what shows up. So there's some ideas.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
Jodi, I'm going to have kind of a final question for you, exploring the concept of light bulb moments, and for you in
Mm.
particular. Do you have any recent or significant light bulb moments that you want to share with the group here?
Oh my gosh, I have them. I think the biggest one that's shifted in my leadership probably like the last decade. There's two actually. One for sure is this ask, don't tell. You know, this coaching mentality. So that shift where the time I take to develop people uh, to create their own autonomy, like to come up with their own answers, is less time than me having to like go back and like you know, hold people accountable. So I think the coaching piece is a big light bulb moment of like, oh, my job as a leader is not to manage people, it's to provide the skills and like coach them to come up with their own answers. There's that. And then the other one is like there's a whole, it's not black and white. Very few things are black and white. Very few things, if anything. There's shades of gray, and I think all people's perspectives are valid. And how to hear those perspectives without taking things personally. So I don't know if those are like, that's just, and I'm continuing to develop that. I'm continuing to try to develop that of like, okay, how do I just, it's not personal, right? Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, Tom. I wanted to ask you questions. There's a bunch of things, yeah. Anyway,
Good
there's
stuff,
some.
Jodi. All right. Well, let's give Jodi a virtual round of applause. Jodi, thanks for joining us today. You will be getting a $1 million light bulb here.
Thank you.
And is this your first one, by the way?
It is my first light bulb moment. I can't believe it. How I've been with how many years have you been doing light bulb
I
moments?
think, I think, well, we're doing light bulb moments. It'll be 6 years in May.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Well,
I
thanks.
should have mentioned this is episode number 217, by the way. So
217, great number. Well, happy to be here. I know that, it just hasn't worked in the past with my schedule and stuff. So thanks so much, Tom, for having a conversation with me. I love it. So
thanks for joining us and your insights and all the great work you're doing. Bravo. So
thank you.
thanks
Thank you.
much. The rest
Thanks so
of
much.
you, we will see you in an upcoming episode. Put some comments in the chat if you would like. And love the topic of leadership, love the topic of circles and good stuff. So the rest of you, we'll see you soon. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the week. All right. Bye, everybody.